Hey guys, BlackCross here. I figure I'd put together a small little video about a particular project that I was actually doing for about a couple of weeks now. And I'm actually going to go into full detail on what I just did. But real quickly, there are a couple of things that I want to go ahead and kind of prep people on before I fully talk about the project that I worked on. Number one is know what you're getting yourself into, you know? It's one of those things where it's like, oh yeah, I can totally do this, but you really need to have, like, everything sorted out. Like, I thought I had everything sorted out, but even then, I still had a couple of complications here and there and stuff, so that was one thing. Another thing is that despite what I say, and trust me whenever I say this, despite what I say, this wasn't really cheap, but it was cheap enough to where you could do it step by step. You know what I mean? It wasn't like overly expensive and stuff like that. But we're going to separate into two different categories. We're going to talk about the main shelf part, and then we'll talk about the technical aspects and everything. So, without further ado, allow me to go into details on a DIY project that I've been working on with my TV stand. So, if you don't know, the last time you saw my room, I had a TV stand. And this TV stand, I was having to hold most of my game systems and everything, as well as my TV and stuff. Over a year, I believe it's been, over a year now, I've had that TV stand. And there was a couple of problems that I had with the TV stand. For starters, number one, it had a hard time holding most of my game consoles. And not to say that that was a bad thing, but the way it was designed, you know, depending on the game console itself, it really couldn't hold all the games systems themselves. Not in a very proper way, per chance. So, I didn't like that. Another reason was the fact that cable management was utter hell behind the system. And when you're a live streamer like I am, and you play a lot of video games and stuff like that, a lot of different console games for that matter, you're always having to change out cables all the time, and it became a nuisance for me in the long run. Like, I literally was like, why am I doing this? Surely to goodness there is an easier way. And thanks to today's technology, now it is easy. It is easier to get things set up and stuff. Admittedly though, however, there is a little bit of a price tag, but we'll get to that part when we cross the boat, per se. Or cross the sea, whatever the phrase is, once we get to that boat. But let's first counter into the actual main problem itself, being that of the TV stand. Now, the TV stand, I kept looking at it, and I was like, surely to goodness I can find a decent TV stand. And let's put it this way, there are some good TV stands out there. There are, however, some problems. There are a couple of problems that I have with the TV stands that are out in the market today. There are two major problems. One of them is measurements. Personally for me, if you're going to have a TV stand that's going to hold all of your game systems and stuff like that, you want it to be the optimal size for all the systems and stuff. You want to have proper spacing to where that way airflow will continue to flow through for some of the consoles, especially some of the more high-tech ones like the PS4 and the PS3, because they now have more of a computerized tech in them now than what they used to. Not to say that the PS2 is low tech, but compared to like the PlayStation 3 and now the PlayStation 4, and won't be long before we'll be entering in the new age of the PlayStation 5, tech is getting very, very high-techy, we'll say. There's no word of saying that is more advanced. We're still playing video games, but now they're able to do just as much as what a computer could do now. I think that's the best way to say it. So, airflow was definitely one thing that I wanted to try to do when it comes to the TV stand. The next thing is being able to hold all the game systems that I'm going to have on my TV stand and being able to play them all and stuff like that. So, at the time of this recording, the game systems that I'm going to have on the TV stand is obviously the PlayStation 2, obviously because it can play PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 1 games. Makes sense. The PlayStation 3, the PlayStation 4, or 5, depending on when I cross that boat. There are 2 Nintendo consoles that are going to be added on into the TV stand itself. The first one is obviously the Nintendo Switch. I've talked about how I was going to get myself a Nintendo Switch eventually, so naturally that's going to be added on into the TV stand when that time comes. And then the Wii. Now, obviously, I have no Wii games. But there are a couple of GameCube games that I would like to play. And I've actually been looking into like a homebrew system where I'm able to actually play like Game Boy Advance games and stuff like that. Right now, that's kind of in the working area thing. It's not like officially me doing homebrewing and stuff like that. But I'm sure that when I get the time, I'll work on something like that. And we may have some fun with it, you know. I've been actually thinking about it mostly because I saw Nerd Thomas playing a Pokemon randomizer. And it looked fun. It looked fun to me. But again, we'll get to that point in the future when we do. The second thing that I want to try doing with the TV stand is obviously optimizing the ability to do cable management behind the TV stand. I cannot tell you the number of times that it took just to get behind the TV stand itself, because the major problem was the fact that I was constantly changing cables around for the TV stand, and a big problem with that is that you're always changing cable around. That's obvious. What people forget, they're cables. So they have a tendency to get tangled up in the worst ways possible. So you're having to spend that much time untangling everything. So it was one of those things where it's like, why do we have as much cables? This is ridiculous. This is insane. This is stupid. So, gosh, it was nuts. It was very, very, very nuts to try to fix that and stuff. And even to this day, going in there and stuff like that was still a nuisance, just trying to fix the cables and stuff like that. So, obviously, in the future, with this TV stand, I wanted to make certain that cable management was a breeze. You know, I can get in there, get everything fixed up, and then boom, it's done. You know, pure simple, it's done. And finally, I wanted to try to raise the TV stand, because one of the issues that I had with finding a TV stand, per se, was that one of them was just obviously the measurements, and the measurements itself just was not matching up to par with what I wanted. You know, you have some TV stands that looked at just a little bit perfect, but they were a little bit on the short side of things. So I was like, I want something that's a little bit above 25 inches high. You know, it's like none of them was. The most that I found was like 22 inches on the cheap end. But that's where the second problem comes into play. The second problem was trying to get prices to work. And if you wanted to have a good TV stand that matches what you're needing, you're going to pay in upwards to $100 or so. We're talking like easily over $100. So it was expensive, what it was. It was very expensive just to get everything to work. And I can't stress this enough, where if something looks like it's ridiculous and insane, and you feel like you can do better than what you're seeing, chances are that's probably the best way to go, is to do whatever you feel like you can do and go from there. So that's what I did. I decided to take my old TV stand, add in a few extra wood pieces to modify it, and then basically improve it overall. And that's what I did. So, obviously, before I went to this massive transformation of the TV stand, I wanted to make certain that the measurements was what I needed, you know, because you want to make certain that everything fits. And if everything doesn't fit, then you need to change a few things here and there. The good news is that after measuring all the systems, the most in terms of width-wise, which is that of the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation 4, in my personal opinion, I thought, was that it was 12 to 13 inches wide. And the good news is that combining the 3 and then the 2 together, that's just perfect amount of space that I need with plenty of room in between and stuff. My other issue was the height part, because while the PlayStation 3, 4, and Wii won't take up any space at all, the PlayStation 2 and especially the Nintendo Switch is a different story. The PlayStation 2, currently that I have, the PlayStation 2 Slim, basically opens up, which means I need that much more clearance space to where that way I can put the disc in. The Nintendo Switch, however, is a different story altogether. Because obviously, depending on how you want to do it, you can take your Joy-Con, slide it into the dock thing, pick up the the tablet screen part of the Switch, and you can take it anywhere you want to. I want to be able to continue doing stuff like that, but not if there's not enough space for me to pull it out, for that matter. So what I did, I took Delmar's Switch and measured it, and according to the measurement that I read, was anywhere between 12 to 13 inches. So I thought, rough counting it, I need at least 13 to 15 inches of clearance space. So the good news is, I did that, and it worked out perfectly. Now, my previous plans was to have each shelf section, the bottom, middle, and top part of the shelf, be housed by these 4 different poles, or wood poles, should I say, however way you want to word them and stuff, and hold them in between and stuff like that. And at first that sounded like a great idea to me, but then I had another problem. How in the heck am I going to screw all of them together to where they stay together? You know, it's like, I didn't think of that. And I was trying to go for the least cost-effective way of doing it, you know? Followed by the least amount of work that I have to put into the damn thing anyway. So, because the more hardware I have to put into, the more money it's going to be cost, and the more that I have to work into and stuff like that. So in other words, if it wasn't trying to screw the wood post to each shelf properly, it was having to get a bracket to hold them down perfectly to where it doesn't jitter, you know what I mean? You don't want the shelf to do this, because that would not be good, you know? I mean, record, my flat screen TV is 55 inches, but it can be a little bit heavy, so it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, I'm worried about setting something on there, followed by 5 consoles, so you're talking like probably closer to $2,000 worth of hardware that could potentially be destroyed just by simply placing a flat screen TV and then there it goes, completely gone. So I tried to come up with a different alternative, and I did actually. The different alternative would be to basically get one single long wood board, put 2 on each side, and then 1 in the back. And then that way, that had everything covered and stuff. So, at the end of the day, that's the alternative that I went with. So, what I did was that I went to Lowe's, and I got myself a wood board, a 12.5 inch wide by 97 inch long wood board. Now, because I have a Ford 500, obviously that long board is not going to fit inside my car. But I figured, let's see if Lowe's does this, because I don't shop at Lowe's that often, so I don't know. So for me personally, I didn't know about this. But for anyone out there who already knew this, but for those that don't know, here's something interesting about Lowe's. You can have wood boards custom cut for you. If you have a particular measurement that you're wanting to get and stuff like that, they can pre-cut it for you. Now, record, they can't do like awkward cut stuff like that or anything like that. No, they can only go a straight line. And for someone like me, thankfully, that's actually what I was wanting to do, you know, so that's what I did. I basically asked them if I could get a cut into 3 different sections. And they were like, okay. And the cool thing is that the first 2 cuts is free. Anything beyond that is 50 cents. I thought about it and I was like, that's not a bad deal, really. It's not. If nothing else, that's a really good deal. So I was like, okay. So future note, if I wanted to do more DIY projects, they can pre-cut it for me. And that's nice. I like it. So I had 2 of the boards cut 30 inches. And then the last piece basically left however many inches was after 30 inches. Because after 2 cuts, it would cost me 50 cents. So I was like, you know what, let's just do the 2 cuts. The 2 first boards have to be 30 inches. And it turned out it worked perfectly. I was able to get them in the car, and that's where I started working. And oh boy, that's where the fun began. So, I first had to take apart the old TV stand. Now, the old TV stand itself is a mainstay TV stand. Mainstay is a main product that Walmart has when it comes to their furniture stuff for shelves and everything. Not to say that it's a bad brand. I've had Mainstay before. In fact, the shelves that I have for like my collectibles and stuff like that, they're all Mainstay. So the fact that they've lasted, some of them I think lasted for like, gosh, it's been years now. It's at least been over 10 years. I know that much. So one shelf has lasted me this long, so it's very well sturdy. They're not like wobbly or anything like that. They're very good. But then again, I've never tried an IKEA shelf before, so I mean, thankfully, because of how Mainstay work, they're easy to assemble, so long as you have the proper tool. And the proper tool is that of a screwdriver, and depending if you're going to use it, a hammer. And I say depending on if you're going to use it, you're probably going to be using the cardboard piece that they have in the back of the shelves and stuff like that for the purpose and everything. But that, your mileage may vary. So, I went on ahead and took apart the old TV shelf, and I went on ahead and started to adjust things to work. And it was this point that I had one regret that I didn't think of, and that was, would have been easier if I had a power drill or a power screwdriver per se. I imagine if I did, this project wouldn't be nearly as painstaking as it ended up being, because hand screwing stuff. Now, the main wood part itself, the main wood board that I was screwing attached to, wasn't the hardest part. It was, however, the Mainstay fake wood part, and I'm pretty sure it's fake wood, because if it was real wood, I would have to wonder why it was so cheap. You know what I mean? So it obviously has to be somewhat of fake wood. But it was screwing into that part that got really tedious, and at the end of the day, my hands were hurting. Painstaking pain. But it worked out really good. There was, however, one regret that I had once I got that part done. And that was the top part of the TV stand itself. I've got it recorded for you to where you can actually see it yourself. The problem is that I actually decided to take whatever was left of the wood boards themselves. I took whatever was left and basically put them together. So it was basically 4 pieces of wood holding together and stuff like that. So, and keep in mind, I hand screwed it all and stuff like that. So naturally, it was not the best looking thing that was put together. And it wasn't until I got it screwed on the top part that another issue came about. It was not wide enough to screw to the back of the third wood board that I had screwed to the back and stuff. And again, that was supposed to hold the top part and everything like that. Turned out that's not the case. So I ended up actually using more than the actual shelf for the time being than I would have liked to have actually used. So that way it could hold the TV instead of like all of a sudden that middle part just go and that would have been the end of it. Hold it up quite well, actually. Hold it up for more than a week if I let it be that way. But I ended up actually changing it the next following week. Keep in mind that first part was actually the first week. The second week was where I did another alternative, where I wanted to change the top part of the TV stand. I decided to go into Lowe's again and try to find a big wood board piece and replace the one that I decided to use, take that out, and replace it with that one, hoping to be a little bit more sturdier. The second thing that I was going to do is, thankfully I actually own one at my mom's place, where I was going to take my jigsaw and cut the back part to where the wood board will stay level on the top part itself. And the best part is, it worked out perfectly, actually, I thought. because at Lowe's I found this like 5/6 wood board piece where it's got like 5 of those smaller wood boards put together into one big one. And I thought to myself, I was like, you know, this might make it better, not just because it would be more sturdier, but maybe it would be more resistant to the TV to where it doesn't cave in, and instead it stays at that level, that same level, whatever the term is. Again, not a contractor or anything like that, I just know that physics. Then again, maybe not. But anyway, so I did that. I also decided to get some black paint because the 2 shelves that was going to stay on there was black. So why not just paint the whole thing black, right? And that's what I did. And as I was continuously working on, I was updating my mother about the whole situation and stuff. And she saw it and she was really impressed by how it looked. But then she gave me another idea. Because obviously the back is going to be exposed somewhat. So in other words, not only A, is there still going to be a lot of cables loose, but B, I'm going to be seeing the white wall in my bedroom and stuff. So it kind of looked a little tacky. A little. Not much, but a little. So I thought about it and I was like, okay, well what did you have in mind? She suggested to me that I get some black fabric and put behind on those 2 empty spots. That way, all I have to do is do like little push pins or something like that. And that way I can just slide cables in and out. And I thought about it and I was like, that's not a bad idea actually. So I thought to myself, I was like, okay, well, we'll work on the finishing TV stand itself, and then we'll go from there. And the good news is that once you combine all the stuff together, you know, the 2 wood boards themselves, followed by sandpaper. Yes, I hand sanded it. Wasn't as bad as like hand screwing it. That was bad, but hand sanding it wasn't bad. And that was so that way there was no splinters on the wood boards and stuff like that, because there was splinters after you cut wood and stuff like that. So I did that. And then the spray painting, the overall shelf remodel itself only cost me $65. Once you think about it, you know, it's like you look at the shelf itself and you see the remodeling and everything like that compared to like whatever other TV stand that I was looking at. In other words, the better TV stand that I was like, oh, this might be something that I can use for my game systems and stuff like that. And then you look at the price. So in other words, I kind of saved upwards to half the amount of money that I was needing to use in order to get a new TV stand. Instead, I made my own. In fact, if I wanted to go one step further, I probably would have built a whole new TV stand, probably made it wider, depending, which really, the way it looks right now is perfect, actually. It holds all my systems in place, and that is what I wanted the most. I wanted to hold all my game systems and stuff in one location. And that worked it out perfectly. Now, this is where we get into the more advanced part of my ultimate TV stand setup. I decided that I wanted to actually fix things up for streaming. Like I said, the problem that I had was having to switch out cables back and forth here and there and everything like that. So I thought to myself, I was like, okay, well, once I pick my systems of what I need, I'm going to get myself an HD switchboard. And this is, for Twitch streamers all over, this is a godsend, I bet. You know, once this technology has ever hit full stream and stuff like that, I don't think people nearly thought that this would be like an absolute must-have when it comes to Twitch streaming itself. Because depending on if you're going to be streaming on multiple consoles and stuff, this could potentially be the one thing you would definitely need later on in life, if you're going to do full streams and everything like that. So, I ended up getting myself an HDMI switcher from Amazon.com. It was actually $31, which it may be a little bit pricey, but considering what you're going to be using it for and how often, this will actually help save you a little bit, you know? It'll save you the frustration of having to change out HDMI cables back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But because I'm going to have it fully set up as an HDMI setup, I decided, okay, well, let's invest a little bit further and convert everything HDMI cable-wise. And this actually makes sense, you know, because there actually is products out there that do exist where you can just transfer it as an HDMI setup. For example, there is now a PlayStation 2 HDMI link cable. It's been recently talked about in the last couple of months now, and only now am I just now getting it. And it's like, you know what, I'm going to be playing a lot of PlayStation 2 games, obviously. It only makes sense that I should invest in this product. Yes, it's also pricey. In fact, it's the second most expensive thing out of this whole setup. But compared to what I'm going to be using it for, it just makes sense to go ahead and get this, you know? Until they have an HDMI PlayStation 2 system itself, which I imagine that alone probably be a little bit more expensive as well, depending. I don't know. I've heard stories, but I haven't heard an official statement saying that, hey, we have an HDMI PlayStation 2 / PlayStation 1 system built thing. I have not heard that, so rumors still, but hopefully that will eventually come around. So once I got that, I decided to get the whole thing, try to get it set up and stuff. That's whenever I had to get a couple more HDMI cables. Obviously I decided to get 4 extra ones, which was like $7 each. Now, I know some people like, you can probably easily find some cheaper than that. That is true. You probably could find something cheaper than that. But would they be as long? You know, I need something to where it can reach the individual systems. And I did get myself a couple of 3-footers, which was perfect for what I need in some cases. In other cases, I think I might need a longer cable though, however. Probably 4 or 5 feet, probably. You know, depending. I mean, it's not like it's going to be from like one end of the room to the next. No. But I want it to be where it's like, it goes from the console all the way to the switchboard. So it's going to be at least like 4 feet at most for clearance space. You know what I mean? So that's what I did on that one. So overall, we've already spent $31 on the switchboard. We've already spent $30 on the PlayStation 2 HDMI. And we spent like $28 in terms of extra HDMI cables, just in case. Which is a good thing I did, because I was going to need them anyway. Which is where we get to our next problem. Most people are already aware of this, but if you're not, I'm going to go ahead and tell you. The Elgato can be a stupid piece of junk. And I say this because apparently it's just stupid not to work in some cases. My brain was trying to think of something because the PlayStation 3 can run on HDMI. Just not the gold pin, obviously. So I was like, okay, well, let's use a different, modern HDMI cable. And good news is, it works up until you turn on the Elgato. So then I thought, okay, well, let's get this HDMI switchboard, and then that should cancel out me having to have a double HDMI splitter thing or whatever and all that stuff. It just skipped the phase, you know, because obviously I'm going to have multiple HDMI cables hooked up to the board, have it hook up to the Elgato, Elgato hooks up to the TV and the computer, and there you go, you're done, right? Nope, no, because for some reason, as soon as I tried to do that, the Elgato decides to play dumb, and both my TV and the Elgato went black. Obviously saying it could not read the data. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. That's what. And here's the thing that I have to say. Isn't the Elgato technically a splitter on its own? When you be technical about it? Because technically you're sending 2 ports of information from 1 port. You know, you've got the HDMI going to the TV, and then you got the other plug-in which hooks up to the back of your computer and stuff. So wouldn't it make sense? Wouldn't it make sense that instead of doing all that extra work, just that be the main splitter? You know what I mean? But apparently no. No. We have to go that extra step further. So I decided to look online, and I got myself another HDMI splitter, which thankfully was the cheapest part of the whole thing, actually. Getting that one particular, the 1 in and 2 out, was only $14. So I went on ahead and went with that. And good news is it works. It absolutely works. It's one of those things where I was like, okay, now we've got it set up. And I think this is the part where I'm like so thankful that I actually decided to go and invest on all this. Because for the total product itself, for $103, yes, in terms of tech, it cost me $103. For the HDMI switchboard, for the HDMI PS2 link cable, for the splitter, and so on and so forth. I have to say, this was a well worth investment, in my personal opinion. It was well worth it. The reason being, number one, obviously all of my systems are connected to the switchboard itself. But the switchboard has a nice feature that I didn't even know of. And I was just fiddling around with it, and that's when I discovered it. It has a smart built-in feature where if a system's turned on, it will automatically switch to that one that's turned on. So like say for example I'm playing the PlayStation 4 and I decide to turn off the PlayStation 4 and turn on like the PlayStation 3 or something like that. The switchboard actually switches it on its own to whatever's being turned on. Now there was another thing I also did just for experimentation, and I wanted to see, okay, I usually watch Netflix and stuff on my PlayStation 4 anyway. What would happen if I just turned on another device? Well, here's the interesting part. As soon as I turned on another device, the switchboard smart enough to turn on to that particular one that just had got turned on. Now, when I'm done with that system, if I turn it off and the PlayStation 4 is still turned on, the system will actually switch back to its previous setup that already has the system turned on. In other words, from where it was turned on when you had one activated, it changes back to another one that's already still on. So let's say, for example, I was watching Netflix and then I decide I want to do live streaming and stuff like that. After I get done live streaming, I can go back to watching Netflix without ever having to touch anything at all. It was just kind of a mind-blowing experience for me. But we're not done yet. I decided to do my last minute adjustments, being that of obviously getting the fabric cloth needed in order to put behind the TV stand, which that only cost me like, rough guess, $10 really. I didn't really end up using the entire thing, but for what I ended up using, it was actually well worth it. I also decided to get myself some LED lights for the TV stand cabinets themselves, so that way it would stand out. And again, that only cost me like $20. So with the added like $30 on top of it, so let's do the count, shall we? We've got the $65 for the hardware stuff, wood stuff and everything. We then have the $103 for all the cables and the HDMI stuff and everything. Then the $30 for everything else. So right there, we're looking at about, let's see, 168, about 198, so close to $200 total for the entire fix-up. And it was not a bad investment. What it wasn't. It really wasn't. Had I just stuck with purchasing a new TV stand, I probably would have been wasting that much more money in regards of it. And I wouldn't have as much money needed for what I wanted to have, which is that of the HDMI switchboard and everything else. So really, in terms of what I've got now, it is absolutely perfect. There is, however, one small thing that I forgot, and that is the Nintendo Wii. Now, the good news is that this particular piece won't be expensive at all. In fact, I looked it up online, and it's right around $10 to $11 just for like a little HDMI plug-in to the Wii, to where that way you can hook up HDMI into it. So in other words, the whole thing is set up in HDMI, and it wouldn't cost me more than what it normally probably would for most people. So in actuality, if you were to do it step by step, do a little bit at a time, eventually you would get the ideal that you would want for your ultimate TV stand. And mostly because of how the switchboard works and everything like that, I think that would be perfect for the everyday person. Again, they're making systems now, or they're making adapters rather, for individual console system. Like they've got one for like the GameCube, they've got one for the N64, so on and so forth. So having all of that together just makes sense to go ahead and invest on an HDMI switchboard. Which means that at the end of the day, it just makes sense to go ahead and invest that extra $30 on one anyway. Record, yes, you'll have to buy that many more HDMI cables and stuff later on, but really when you think about it, because of how I did it, which it took me like 3 weekends, 3 weeks to get this whole setup built. And I have to say, I'm very proud of what I did. I'm very proud that I actually went this direction, and I'm very glad that it worked it out overall. There are a few things that I probably would have changed. Number one, I would have definitely used a power screwdriver. I didn't because I don't own one. And number two, my stepdad, Wes, his ran out of power. And he didn't know where his charging cable thing was for it. So obviously there was no way to juice it up. Probably could have asked my dad, because obviously he has enough power tools in his shop in order to fuel an entire ecosystem of contractors, construction workers, so on and so forth. But I just didn't get a chance to think of that because he's always busy during this time of the year. So I didn't get a chance to ask him that. But overall, I think the overall build was perfect, really. I'm very glad that I did what I did. I'm very glad what I got put together and stuff. And I mean, you tell me. You tell me. Do you think this was a well worth investment that I put together? I think I did. I think this is perfect for what I was wanting to do. Let me know in the comments below if you felt like that maybe I could have done better. Maybe there might have been some better products out there that would have been cheaper and stuff. Let me know in the comments below. And if you like this type of video where I do like DIY projects and stuff like that, let me know and I'll try to do more in the future. Any DIY project that I feel like would be like necessary, like DIY projects that I feel like, yes, this is something that I should work on. We'll see how that goes. But anyway, little guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care, guys.